please welcome Senior Advisor to the President and Chair of the White House Council on Women and Girls, Valerie Jarrett. U.S. Secretary of Labor, Thomas E. Perez. And the President of the Center for American Progress, Neera Tanden.
Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Let us hear from you. Wow, I can't believe you all showed up. Well, I am delighted to be here with my co-host, Tom and Neera, who you will hear from shortly, to welcome you to the first ever White House Summit on Working Families.
Yeah, all right.
So the president's goals are simple. He wants to make sure that every hard-working American gets a chance to get ahead. And he also wants to make sure that our 21st century workplace reflects the needs of those 21st century families. And as we know, the demographics have changed over the decades. Now we know that women make up nearly half of the workforce. 40, yes, indeed. You can clap whenever you want. 40% of moms are either single bread makers or the sole primary bread earner for the family. So that's a major change in our demographics. The majority of our children live in families where both parents work. And so what we need to do is to make sure that our workplace changes both in policy and in culture to reflect those changes. Isn't that right? And so, over the course of the last couple of months, we have traveled around the country, from the president in Orlando, Florida, to San Francisco, to Seattle, to Boston, New York, my hometown of Chicago, Virginia. We have talked to workers and business leaders and union leaders and academics and deans and stakeholders from around the country, all helping us figure out what we do to change that paradigm. And reflected in this room and watching us online are all of you who have contributed to the agenda for today and also the announcements that we will be making. So thank you very much. We have listened to your stories, and everybody has stories. And so, of course, since I have the podium, I'm going to tell you a couple of mine. I remember very vividly, I'm not going to tell you exactly how many years ago, well, maybe I will, 28 years ago, and some change. I was sitting around a conference room table at 2 a.m., 8.5 months pregnant. And I kept trying to slip my swollen feet up onto a chair where nobody would notice. And for the women in the audience who've been pregnant, you will know that I couldn't actually sit there for more than about a half an hour without getting up and taking a little departure. But I was too embarrassed to tell anybody I had to go to the bathroom. And so I made up all kinds of excuses for why I was leaving the room. I needed to get some papers. I needed to make a phone call. I needed to do this. I needed to do that. I needed to pee. And I felt like I was alone, and I was in a room full of men, and I didn't think anybody there was going through what I was going through. So one of our big messages today is that you are not alone. That's another thing that today is all about. Amen. Fast forward a few years later in a different job, and my daughter is a toddler, and I had a client who was extremely demanding. And I love my client, and she was one of my first mentor. But I needed to get home because I would wake up in the morning trying to figure out how could I get home by bedtime. You know what that's like. And so I told her, you know, I love to cook. Why don't you come over to my house for dinner, and I'll make dinner. I don't actually love to cook. And she would come over every night, and I'd make dinner, and then I would get a chance to say goodnight to my daughter. And now, years later, I look back, and I'm not so sure she actually thought I liked to cook, but she liked those meals, and she was willing to accommodate to my schedule so that I could be home by bedtime. A terrific mentor and a great client. And then my final story that I'll share with you is one that I have told very, very often. And this is about employers who get it. And I was sitting in a conference room working for Mayor Daley, a little intimidating character for those of you who have ever met him. And I had just been promoted, and it was one of my first meetings actually in his office. And I was sitting across the table from Susan Schur, who used to be the First Lady's chief of staff. And Susan and I both had children in second grade. And we kept looking at each other and looking at each other and looking at each other. And finally, the mayor realized that we weren't paying any attention. And so he says, where is it that you need to go that's more important than here? And so in a moment of complete, horror, terror, truth, I said to him, the Halloween parade starts in 20 minutes. And we are 25 minutes away. And he said, and this is really important, then what are you doing here? And I am telling you, from that moment, he had my loyalty, he had my work. I worked twice as hard. I was determined to be worthy of that. And so, as we have heard from all of you, what we have heard is, for hardworking folks who are trying to make ends meet, we need to raise the minimum wage. Point number one. We have heard that everybody should get to go to that Halloween parade, so workplace flexibility is important. Paid leave is important. One of the only countries that doesn't have paid leave. Child care is important. For a while now, we've talked about the glass ceiling, but you know what? It is that sticky floor that is the problem for so many minimum wage workers who can't get that break to get ahead. These are the issues that we've heard from you. And so if you are that single mom who sends your kid to school with a little bit of a fever because you don't have any childcare, I've done that. If you are that dad who would love to stay home with your children and your company has a policy that allows you to stay home, but nobody in the culture of your company takes advantage of that policy. If you are parents who never have been able to attend a parent-teacher conference, let alone a concert or a play in your school because your employer has rigid hours. If you are a company who wants to do the right things by your employees, but simply doesn't know what to do, well then let me tell you something. You're not alone, and this day is for all of you. So we are excited to be here. We're going to learn. We're going to have announcements to make. We're going to have a conversation with one another. But the most important thing I also want you to remember is that this day is an important moment, but it's not just a moment. It's a movement. It's a movement, and we are going forward from this day forward. So with that, I want you to welcome my partner in this, without whom this conference would simply not have been possible, who is an advocate for workers around the country each and every single day. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Tom Perez.
Thank you. Thank you. Morning. All right. Good morning. You know, on cue, Valerie announced that this was a movement, and General Rosa DeLaura walks in and takes her seat. Did you notice that, y'all? Hello, General. Great to see you. It's an honor to be here, and I want to say thank you to Valerie, to Tina, to our partners in the White House, to our remarkable partners at the Center for American Progress, Neera and her wonderful team. And I must take a moment to say thank you to our folks in the Women's Bureau. Latifah, where are you? Doing great work around here. You know, these regional summits have been remarkably productive and instructive. And here's what we've learned. We've learned two sets of things from these regional summits because we've been asking people the following things. You know, what's keeping you up at night? What are your biggest sources as a working family, as a working parent, as a single parent? What are your biggest sources of fear and concern? And the first thing we hear is that I'm working harder and falling further behind. You know, what keeps me up at night is my second job because I can't afford to make ends meet. What keeps me up at night is the sense that I want to put food on the table, but I also want to be home to eat at the table with my family because the most important family value is time spent with your family. And I don't enjoy that luxury. I don't enjoy that luxury because the minimum wage has decreased in value 20% from where it was 30 years ago. I don't enjoy that luxury because my wages have been flat, even though I'm working 50, 60 hours a week. I don't want to be on food stamps, I'm told. we're told, with regularity, but I can't afford not to be on food stamps. And that is why the president is so focused on wage fairness, making sure that a fair day's work pays a fair day's wage, making sure that nobody in this country who works a full-time job should have to live in poverty. And that is why, in addition to fighting for Harkin Miller, the president is using his pen and his phone to make sure we use every regulatory tool in our arsenal to help working families. For instance, the president helped to make sure that 2 million home health workers have access to minimum wage and overtime protections. And you know, 90% women, 50% people of color, 40 to 45% on some form of public assistance. These people are doing God's work, and they deserve a fair wage and overtime benefits. And so we'll continue to fight for wage fairness, because we've heard that throughout our 6 visits to the various regional summits. But we've also heard something else, which is we need to make sure, as Valerie correctly pointed out, that we have the flexibility we need to make sure that I can go take my kid to the doctor. I can take my mother or my father to the doctor. You know, we have such a changing universe here. We see the nature of the family has changed. The nature of work has changed. We're living in that modern family society, but we're still stuck with Leave It to Beaver rules. That's the world we're living in, and we've got to change that. And you know, too many people, as Valerie correctly points out, have to choose between the job that they need and the family that they love. That's a choice that no one should have to make. I've heard Neera say with great, remarkable passion that, you shouldn't have to win the boss lottery to be able to take 2 hours off to take your kid to the doctor. President Clinton did a great thing when he passed the Family and Medical Leave Act. But for millions of Americans who are either not covered by the Family and Medical Leave Act, or who are nominally covered, but in fact are not covered because they simply can't afford to take that time off, we need the next frontier of workplace fairness. We need the next frontier of flexibility. We need to make sure that we're no longer in the company of 3 or 4 nations on the planet, who are the only nations on the planet who don't have some form of paid leave. That's not who we are as a nation. And that's why we're fighting for this. That's why we've been working so hard. And that's why the president continues to support grants year after year, a state paid leave fund, because states are demonstrating that you can do this. Employers are demonstrating that you can do this, and it's the right thing to do, and it's the smart thing to do. Employers who pay minimum wage, employers who pay above the minimum wage, employers who have flexible leave policies, they are creating a competitive advantage for themselves and for their shareholders. And that's why we're fighting to do this. That's why I'm so proud to announce today that we're investing in critical new research to understand the benefits of paid leave, and that DOL will be investing in new grants to support the creation of state paid leave programs. And by the way, speaking of the FMLA, we believe that all families deserve its protections, and that's why we have proposed new rule changes just last week to realize the promise of Windsor and to give all our LGBT brothers and sisters in legal same-sex marriages the same rights that every family has. I'm a labor lawyer and I'm a civil rights lawyer. And you know what? As Valerie said, progress does not roll in on wheels of inevitability. It takes everybody in this room and in this nation. It takes coalition building. Civil Rights Act of 1964, we're celebrating the 50-year anniversary. That was first introduced in 1948. It was all about persistence. This workplace flexibility, we had the FMLA. It has done well. We need to take the next frontier. We have a president who's committed to that. We have partners who are committed to that. I am confident that we will indeed build this movement because we've got generals like Rosa DeLaura, Valerie, Jarrett. We have the general-in-chief, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, and everyone else. And we have my partner right here, the nonprofit leader, the president of the Center for American Progress, and my friend, Neera Tanden. Neera.
So I have to say, what great partners. We should be able to make a lot of change with this team. And I want to say on behalf of the Center for American Progress, we've been really thrilled to have a fantastic partnership over months and months and months leading up to the conference with Valerie at the White House and the entire White House team and the Department of Labor, which has had a fantastic team. Valerie is absolutely right. We all have stories. Everyone in this room and the people you represent, thousands upon thousands of people, have a story. I have my own story, which is that, you know, when I had 2 young children, I had a son who was a year and a half, daughter was 4 and a half. I took a very high pressure job with a lot of time commitments to the job, and I had a boss at that time who saw that I was struggling a little bit, and she rescheduled meetings around me, made sure she changed her schedule so I could have my responsibilities, both as a parent and as a worker. She changed around the entire work culture to accommodate parents. And as Secretary Perez said, you know, I really felt like I won the boss lottery. But that's a real problem in this country. You shouldn't have to win the boss lottery. We should all have work situations where people recognize that when we are good workers and good parents, that's best for the bottom line. And that's why and that's so much of what today is about, and the White House has a fantastic report out today making the case for how improving our working conditions for families is best for the bottom line. We have fantastic partners from around the country. Most importantly, we have women, parents here today who are struggling with the challenges of making those terrible choices. And we've heard these voices in the events leading up to today. We've heard from parents who had to put sick children on a bus because it was that or making their rent. We've heard parents struggling with the decisions about going to work when they know they should be at home. Parents talking about how they've anxiously waited to 5 o'clock and then dashed home because they knew their child didn't have childcare. And that's what's motivated today. Again, today is not just about changing the conversation, it's ultimately about changing the country. And we're gonna do that with everyone here staying committed. And we have fantastic academics, advocates, people, and business leaders who recognize how critical it is to have the workplace rules that will help them compete in the 21st century. I want to just say a few thanks to a few of our partners who've helped support CAP in putting this conference together. Connie Milstein, the Ford Foundation, the Sloan Foundation, Deloitte, Cerner Foundation, Bright Horizons, Annie E. Casey, and EY. All of these people are leaders. All of these people are leaders who bring together diverse viewpoints to ensure that we can make change. And we have to learn from those models. We'll have a great day today, but today is just the beginning. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves and make change at the local, state, and ultimately federal level to improve the quality of lives for all our families and ultimately for our economy. And so it's my great honor and privilege to introduce Jill Biden and Vice President Biden, because these are two people who work every day to improve working families and who we are so thrilled to help start off the conference.
Good morning, everyone. I think I need some of what Tom Perez was drinking. I mean, he really had that energy, didn't he? It's wonderful to welcome you all here to this important discussion, and thank you, Neera, for that kind introduction. Everyone here knows the challenges facing working families. I, myself, can vividly recall teaching full-time, getting a master's degree, and raising 3 young children. Even though I had a lot of support and resources, it was still a lot at once. And those kinds of challenges have only increased for today's working families. Today, in 3/4 of families, all parents work, whether it's a single-parent family or both parents working. Women are nearly half of our workforce, but too many women still earn less than men and often face advancement barriers. And on top of an already complicated child care schedules and community obligations, many working families are also caregivers for aging parents. More and more companies know that they need to find ways to address those challenges so that they can attract and retain talent. They also know that people now choose one job over another because it is in the best interest of their families. Last month, I was in Seattle for a discussion with business leaders and employees to hear more about some of the creative ways that they are addressing these challenges and attracting and retaining top talent. What I heard there was pretty simple. Employers need to take more than just the 8 hours a day an employee is sitting at his or her job. They should also think about the stresses that employees face outside of work. Childcare, aging parents, long commutes. If an employer can find creative ways to ease some of those stresses, employees can be more productive with the time that they are at work. What I heard from employees was also very clear. When they felt that their workplaces valued and appreciated them, they were upbeat and enthusiastic about their jobs. They were committed to their employers. And they saw that their job was not just a place where they went to work for 8 hours a day, but a place where they were invested in the company's mission. One of the companies at the discussion was Moe's, a software company that works hard to create a flexible culture that recognizes the competing demands on its employees. Jamie, a project manager at Moe's, told us that her days were filled with organizing meetings and making sure her team is getting everything done. But because of Moe's no meeting Friday policy, she was able to enroll her twins into a 4-day kindergarten next year and start Friday Fun Days this summer. Not only is Jamie getting to spend time with her kids, she also has peace of mind that every Monday she won't have to catch up on a day's worth of missed meetings. REI was another company that participated in the discussion. They allow for flexible commuting so employees can go in earlier and miss rush hour. I'm sure that's something everybody here can relate to coming into Washington. As an outdoors company, they also want their workplace culture to encourage employees to live healthy lives, what they refer to as nature nurtures. So they encourage employees to get outside, go for a hike, and engage in activities that they enjoy outdoors. Pretty nice, huh? The participants also discussed other ways to address many of the challenges every working family faces, offering on-site daycare, providing a set amount of paid leave, and connecting workers with elder care programs. Underscoring all of these policies was another theme. Employers should trust employees and trust that these solutions make workers happier and more productive. It's important that businesses adopt policies that recognize that life is rarely simple and that the American family has changed. When we think of caregivers, we often think of a mother caring for her child, but that image simply does not reflect today's realities, particularly those in the sandwich generation, individuals who are caring for their children at the same time they are caring for their parents. Like so many Americans, both my husband Joe and I have had firsthand experience of caring for our parents in the final years of their lives. I can vividly recall helping Joe care for Joe's parents, both of whom came to live with us in the last months of their lives. But the role of caregivers in today's society is expanding far beyond children caring for parents, a role that reminds me of two brothers I met last fall, Kyle and Brett Pletsky. Kyle is an Army specialist who was injured in his first deployment to Afghanistan in late 2012. During his recovery, Brett's employer encouraged him to make the most of the company's leave policy. They kept his job open so that he could go and care for his brother. Stories like theirs are why this convening is so important. Everyone participating in this important discussion can contribute innovative ideas to help make life a little better for our working families. Whether it's resources and flexibility for employees who are acting as caregivers, or mentoring for women, or offering flexible working arrangements, all of us must continue to think creatively about the workplace of the future so that we can ensure that every working American has an equal opportunity to succeed and care for our children. That's what I know our next speaker wakes up every morning thinking about. It is my great pleasure to introduce my husband, Vice President Joe Biden. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Before Jill exits the stage, let me say I'm sure glad she took me to work today. Tom, I think you have, I don't know, I was just out at Starbucks headquarters, and I think you got the double jolt in the morning here. I don't know, man. But by the way, he's that way at midnight, too. And that's why I love working with him on the work he and I are doing about jobs for the future. But Valerie, thank you, kiddo. You've been a great, great friend to me personally, but you and Tina have never let up on this subject. You have, from the moment we took office, been focusing on, and it matters. It matters a great, great, great deal. And Neera, you do an incredible job at CAP, but you do an incredible job of everything you touch, and it's a pleasure to work with you. Look, let me begin by stating the obvious. Sometimes it's not always so obvious. Every single circumstance is different. Every one of you in this audience has a different circumstance, different opportunity, different problems. How many of you have children out there? Raise your hand. Okay. In every one of your cases, there are different pressures. They're not all the same. They're not all the same. And the fact is that the fact that you're here, the vast majority of you, you're among the lucky ones. Like Jill and I, you're among those who are educated. You're among those who have options, mostly. You're the ones who generally make enough money that you can get some help in caring for your children or your parents. Even if you don't have the salary to do that, you're the ones that know your way around. You know the existence of programs to help your elderly parents or your children. You're the ones in your communities who have, we're not going to speak about it much today as I looked at the agenda, but for example, there's a whole lot of things that are going on and we've been working on for, in my case, for over 35 years to ameliorate the pressure on families. And that is, everything from after-school programs. They make a gigantic difference. It's a government program. But when mom and dad, we have millions of turnkey children going home after school, no one there, 3 o'clock, 3:30. In circumstances sometimes that are not always, they're either, I was raised in the grade school by the nuns. They say, the temptation. Well, it's, I don't care how good your child is, but a 12-year-old going home and turning on the key to get in the house, even in a safe neighborhood, it's still a concern. And so there's a whole lot of things we are not going to be talking in detail about, but the vast majority of single moms, and I might add dads, don't have these opportunities. Each one of you here, if you're honest, and you all are honest, you know, I mean this sincerely, you know how difficult it is to do your job, advance in your job, and be the parent or caregiver for your parents that you want to be. You've been raised, 99% of you, with the notion that your first and foremost obligation is to your family, whether it's your parents in distress or your children. And it's really difficult. A lot has to do with the personal choices that we make as to how we allocate our time versus relative to our careers. I don't think anyone participating here makes any moral judgments about any of the choices people make, as long as they're conscious choices with real opportunities. And our job, it seems to me, is to provide as many opportunities so that the choices that are always going to be difficult, the choices that have to be made, are at least more rational. At least there are more options. But there are a lot of factors and a lot of players that can have a significant ameliorating impact on the difficult choices women primarily, but men also have to make in raising their children. If you have, do you have an extended family that can help you? Well, that's a big factor. Can you afford safe and nurturing daycare? What organizations outside, including your school, outside your school, are available in your community, from the YWCA to boys clubs and girls clubs to, no, you by the way, we owe you. You do an incredible, I spent the bulk of my career chairing the Judiciary Committee. There's an absolute direct correlation between children getting in trouble and having access to boys and girls clubs, YWCAs, YMCAs. It matters. You got to give children choices. Children basically want to do the right thing, but the peer pressure is overwhelming. Sometimes they need an escape. They need an excuse when mom or dad are not present. But look, you all know all of these things. But one of the factors we're talking about today is also that can be incredibly ameliorating. It's not just the policies, but how understanding is your employer? How understanding? Lastly, what if anything can the federal government do to help? And I say lastly, because all these other things that are out there in the community, if they're working really well, including your employers, there's less need. Now, there's need for minimum wage, there's need for a whole range of things you discuss, and equal pay, and things we've been working on our whole careers. But there's an awful lot that can be done just to change the atmosphere. The examples Jill gave. You're going to get to discuss all of these things today and more, but if you excuse, as we used to say in the Senate, a point of personal privilege, I can speak a little bit from my own experience. Now, the first thing I was going to say is, look at Biden, man. He's got a mildly expensive suit on. He's Vice President of the United States of America. He makes, notwithstanding he's listed as the poorest man in Congress, he still makes a lot of money as Vice President of the United States, and I do, by the way. I do. Don't hold it against me that I don't own a single stock or bond. Don't hold it, I have no savings account. But I got a great pension and I got a good salary. And for real. Sometimes we talk about this stuff about struggle. My struggle, my God, compared to where I grew up and the way people are trying to go through things now. But here's the point I want to make. I've been really, really fortunate. And Jill is a community college professor. She's seen the struggle of working parents trying to secure an education while earning a living and raising a family, and many times being the victim of domestic violence in the process. And as a military mom, and through the great work she and the First Lady have been doing in joining forces, she knows the stress on military families face, and they struggle through multiple deployments, caring for returning veterans, coping with financial and emotional pressures. These are real. These are real. And you know, she knows what you know, that no family's alike, no struggle is the same, no opportunities are identical, but all families, whether they're headed by two parents or a single mom or a single dad, share the same basic dreams and same goals for themselves and for their children. We can't equalize it all, but we sure in heck can do a lot better. And so I want to support, they want to support their families. They want to feel comfortable. They want to feel safe. They want to be in a secure home and a secure neighborhood. They want to send their kids to college. They want to care for their mom and dad if they have to, and put aside just a little bit, and maybe not enough for their own retirement. They want to achieve these goals without having to sacrifice all of the moments that really matter. My generation, and obviously I'm a lot older than you can see that, but all kidding aside, in my generation, as I was getting in college, coming out of college in the late 60s, it was, it's not quantity time, it's quality time. Give me a break. Give me a break. There's not one important thing my sons or daughter have said to me that came about and said, no, we have quality time. Let's go fishing. Let's discuss this. And as parents, you know that to be the truth. The most incredible things your children say to you, ask of you, reveal to you, are in those moments that you don't anticipate. Moments that occur when you're reading them a story at night, when you get home and you climb in bed with them, even though they're already asleep, and you pet them. No. One of the great memories of my daughter, who's a grown woman and a social worker, as I'd stroke her hair, she said, Daddy, you know what I miss most? Is how you used to smell coming home from work lying down in bed with me. You know what I'm talking about. They're the things that matter, for God's sake. But not all of us have the kind of flexibility that I had. Not all of us had the opportunity. Not all of us had that outside help. There's no substitute for being there. No amount of compensation can replace being physically, emotionally, or mentally present when your child needs you. But we all know there's going to be those times when we're not going to be there. It's just a fact of life. When I lost my wife and daughter in a car accident shortly after I got elected, before I was sworn into the United States Senate, I had a whole heck of a lot of help. I've got an incredible family. My sister's the origin of a phrase in our family: if you have to ask, it's too late. And I mean that sincerely. If you have to ask, it's too late. So I came home from the hospital and my sister had already moved into my home, with her husband, gave up his job. No, I'm serious. Who has that? Who has that kind of help? My mother was nearby, my brothers. They all helped me raise my children. But I was a single father for 5 years. And I want to tell you, with all the help I had, And I was making a good salary. I was a U.S. Senator. I was making a salary a lot more than the average. I was making $42,000 a year. And that was then, no, the average salary was closer to $19,000. So I was doing well. And I had all this help. And had the overwhelming goodwill of an entire state who wrapped their arms around me and my children. And I used to think to myself, I give you my words, I used to think to myself, I have a secretary in Delaware who had 3 children and is single. And her child's going to be held to the exact same standard mine is. The exact same standard under the law. And how in God's name could she do what I was able to do? And I was finding it hard, really hard. But I got lucky. I still had to find my way to be there with my boys. My son Hunter was 3, my son Bo was 4, still in a full body cast, both arms, both legs, all the way up to his neck. And when I'd leave for Washington, every day I could almost hear the fear in their voices. Are you going, Daddy? They wanted to know as I was coming back. They wanted to know, is everything going to be okay? So to demonstrate to them, but not really, because I needed them, I made a point to start. I thought I was only going to stay for 6 months, start to commute back and forth every day. 8,000 round trips later, not a joke. 8,000. No, really and truly. By the way, I needed to do that. I needed to do that just for me. They helped raise me as much as I helped raise them. But here's the point. You know what I found out, and employers can help in this, that it really matters. That even if it's only like I'd get home at night and after 5 years, no man deserves one great love, let alone 2. And 5 years later, when Joe came along and basically saved all of our lives, what happened was that I'd come home, and I used to get home late, not real late. I'd get home by usually 8 o'clock. And to keep the boys up, and they'd have their dessert while I had my dinner. And I know Michelle would not like giving them a dessert. But it was healthy dessert. It was healthy dessert. And look, you do it. You go up and you lie in bed with them. We get whatever your tradition is. In my case, we'd say prayers like my grandpa Finney could do with me. And they would, and they're the things they remember. When they woke up in the morning, it was no Ozzie and Harriet. All in the family kind of stuff where we all sat and had breakfast together. But while I was shaving, they'd come in and have whatever's on their mind for that day, or we go downstairs, and while I'm having a cup of coffee, they're eating their breakfast. Because young kids can only hold an important idea for about 12 hours. No, for real. You miss it, it's gone. You miss it, it's gone. And it matters to them and to you. Look, nothing was more important to me than being able to be there, but I had this overwhelming luxury. I didn't have any one boss. I had 1 million people in Delaware who were my boss. And they were pretty understanding. No, I sincerely mean it. I missed my first 6 years. I was one of the lowest percentages of people voting. I had an 87%, I think that's what it was, voting record. I never missed a vote that was a deciding vote, and most were procedural votes. So everybody said, they came up with all these explanations. The other team was doing the right thing. They were attacking me on TV, which made sense, saying, would you hire a man who only showed up 87% of the time, et cetera? And so I, over the advice of and I tell you this to tell you what I think about how people think. Over the advice of the experts, I did one ad. I looked into the camera and I said, look, it's true. I missed whatever it was, 13, 15% of the votes. And if you elect me again, I will do it again. No, I'm serious. And I said, because I will never miss a vote to make a difference. But if I have a choice between a procedural vote and my child's parent-teachers meeting, I'm going to the meeting. But here's the point. It's not about me. Look at the luxury I had. How many of you would like to be able to do that? I'm no different than any one of you, for real. I'm not trying to say this is, oh, Joe Biden, he did the good. No, I had the ability to do it. You all want to do it. And I could make a choice. And I was confident the people in my state would understand, because I was confident. And the reason I tell you the story is I think that's how almost every American thinks. They think if they could, if they only could, they would. So folks, look, the fact of the matter is, there are too many people where it comes down to making a choice between doing that parent-teachers meeting or going to that championship game or showing up at that debate or being there just when your child is sick, having to choose between doing that and their job. Not one time, but like many of you, my family's been an incredible consumer of healthcare costs. My sons were critically injured. My daughter had a subluxar vertebrae in traction for a long time. Both Jill and I teaching. But we had the option. We could choose who could stay home. I could operate from my home, assuming there weren't a critical vote. But the point is, those kind of choices, most times it comes down to not losing your job or not. It comes down to the subtle things. It's about, if I don't stay and help finish the project and not go to my daughter's parents' night, they're going to think I don't really want to work hard. They're going to think I really don't care about my job. So damn it. No, your employer's not demanding to do it. But if I don't stay, I have some really incredible people work for me over the years. I forget one time we counted, I've had something like 25 Rhodes Scholars, more Marshall Scholars, people. I had a law firm of 65 people as chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Almost everyone graduating in the top 5% of their class. Really smart people. Ambitious people. I remember during the really difficult hearing, a hearing having to do with, that I was conducting on the Supreme Court, and a very controversial hearing, Judge Bork. And the young man who, and I'm not going to mention his name, one of the young men who had done most of the research and the background on Judge Bork, the hearing, and he was having difficulty at home. He was having difficulty because he was spending so little time at home for the previous 6 months in preparation. He was having difficulty in his marriage. And the day the hearing started, fortunately, I have a guy named Ron Klain, who was my chief of staff, who was a wonderful guy, came to me and said, so-and-so has a problem. I said, tell him if he comes into work, he's fired. Not a joke. Not a joke. I wasn't being noble. It was the right thing to do, but beyond that, he was important. He could do it from home. He could be on the phone. He could let us know. And he had to be assured, though, that it would not affect his advancement. That's all employers have to do sometimes, is to let you know that these subtle choices, they don't have to have some massive policy, particularly if they're smaller. Look, no one, and the other piece about what Jill pointed about trust. You know, folks, we make such a mistake, I think, sometimes, because I don't know, I'm not quite sure why. But guess what? Trust is usually returned. Trust is really usually returned. I have a policy. I just hired on 3 very high-profile people. The first thing I sat with them when I hired them, said, look, here's the deal. If you ever have any problem at home, no matter what it is, you don't have to tell me what it is, because sometimes it's embarrassing. My child has a drug problem. I'm taking him to a counselor. Vast majority of parents face that. I'm having difficulty. My wife is having, and I are having a problem. My father is. You don't have to give me an explanation. Just say, look, I need the time. I need the time. No explanation. You have no idea. I guess you do have an idea how much, not only is it the right thing to do, but how much loyalty that engenders. How much response you get. And by the way, to those of your employers, the corporate folks out there, you know when it's being abused. You don't need a roadmap. You know if that is really abused. And so it's a lot easier to trust. People don't abuse trust if you really trust them, by and large. And though these are the things that I think all employers can do. Now, it's true that many times problems are much bigger. Company-wide policies have to be made, decisions on flexible schedules, expanded leave policies, telecommuting, and job training and education, on-the-job training and education. These are all points you're going to discuss in some detail today. I wish I could stay, I really do. I wish I could stay and be in this conference. So the point I want to make today is that all the corporate executives and business owners in this room, it's about creating policies that allow your worker to balance family and work, and it's never going to be an absolute balance, but in a way that's better for them. If you give it a shot, I think you'll find the return is overwhelming. When I was chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, a woman named, I mention this because in the book Lean In, her name is mentioned. She's still a great friend of mine, and I know that Valerie knows her well. Cynthia Hogan, a really first-rate lawyer. She was my chief counsel, and she was with me a long time, and she's one of the reasons why we were able to successfully pass the Violence Against Women Act. And before she left in 1996, when her first child was born, and as Sheryl Sandberg described in her book, Lean In, when I asked Cynthia to return when I became vice president as my chief counsel at the White House, she was concerned that she wouldn't be able to continue to have time for her family. Now, teenagers a little bit older. So we worked it out. We found a way to give her time and flexibility she needed, benefiting from her experience and her talents, which were badly needed. As an employer, I benefited just as much as she did. She left by a certain time so she could be home. It wasn't a hard thing. There was no loss of productivity in my office. I mean, I would have taken Cynthia for 5 hours a day. But the point is, she was able to do it from home. So when the kids walked through the door, which was important to her, that she was there. She was in connection with the office. And we made a rule. No matter how important it was, she didn't get any text message during dinner because it was an important time. Important time. Look, here's the deal. You all know it. Study after study confirms my experience. Family-friendly policies reduce turnover, they boost performance, and they boost productivity. And speaking of Cynthia and some of the other women in my shop with children, they're the reason I was able to write the domestic violence law in the first place. And I can't leave. And the good news for you is I'm about to leave, but I can't leave without saying something about the Violence Against Women Act. You know, nearly 1/3 of the victims of domestic violence lose their jobs because of the impacts on their employers. And they are real impacts on their employers. What happens in the workplace? An abuser coming into the workplace, disrupting, breaking out the windows of the car in the parking lot, flattening the tires, threatening coworkers. It happens. And so you can, on one hand, understand why employers, particularly in big operations, say, well, we don't need this. We don't need this. It's disruptive. But the total cost to the economy, or the cost of the economy, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, is about, they can list, about $8 billion in lost productivity in healthcare. That's not the total cost to the whole economy, which is much higher. And employers can, and many are. I was going to list them, but my staff says don't go listing the ones because you'll leave somebody out. And you can know I always listen to my staff. But all kidding aside, a number of major companies are making a big difference because they've developed policies to help the victims keep their jobs and stay safe. It takes effort on the part of the company. But I would urge you at another time, not part of your discussion today, but I think you cannot talk about opportunity for women unless you talk about dealing with, in the work environment, the violence against them that occurs, the domestic violence. But I hope you employers will take a look at some of your fellow companies who've done in providing a permissive environment for victims against domestic violence. You're going to hear a lot more today, and I know many of you are already putting these policies in place. So I want to close by thanking you all here, thanking you for everything you do for working families in your companies and your communities in your country. And like I said, we may need broad policies, and I think we do, and you'll talk about them. But an awful lot of this can be done just by subtle but nonetheless significant understanding of the circumstance that particularly single moms and some single dads have to deal with. Thank you for caring so much about our kids. Thank you for sharing so much about being able to make sure that particularly women have the opportunity to meet their potential and every one of their expectations. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks, Valerie. Thank you.